Must have looked like a jackal.
Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 20th of August, 2004, approximately 9 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, your date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Anthony J. Rogers. My day of birth is 8/10/09. Hoosick Falls, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
6th grade.
Okay. Where did you go to school in Hoosick Falls?
I went to Catholic school.
St. Mary's
St. Mary's
Catholic
Academy.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, where were you when you heard about
I
it?
was working at a Waterville Arsenal.
Oh, you
I
said.
was a guard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Were you armed at that point?
Huh?
Were you armed?
Did you carry a weapon?
No,
As a
yeah,
guard.
in the Arsenal, I was a guard at the North Gate.
Okay.
How long did you work there?
6 weeks.
Oh,
Then when they bombed Pearl Harbor, I got a notice, come back and report to Pine Camp Drum.
okay. Now, were you in the National Guard or something before then? Okay.
No, they just sent me there.
All right. So you were drafted?
I volunteered.
Okay. So you volunteered for the Army.
Yeah.
Why did you pick the Army?
I was just a draftee, that's all. And they told me if I volunteered, I could go any place I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You know where they sent me? Wallace, Texas, with a 1917 uniform, World War I uniform.
So that's where you went for basic training, is in
Basic
Texas?
training, Camp Wallace, Texas.
How old were you at the time?
At the time, I was 30 years old.
Wow.
I was 30 years old, and from Camp Wallace, Texas, they sent me to Fort Snelling, Minnesota for 90 days after they passed the 30-year-old law. They kept me for 90 days. For what? I asked them. Well, I had to go, and I had to call Senator Mondale. I called him on, I didn't call him, they called him from the hospital. And I called Senator Mondale, he says, I'll see you the next day, tomorrow, he says.
Mm-hmm.
What they keeping me for? So he says, got a hold of Captain Kopp. Captain Kopp says, look at his records. We haven't got a man here who can do anything that he can do. I'm a welder, I'm a mechanic, and a professional barber, professional mechanic and a barber.
Mm-hmm.
I started the automobile business when I was 10 years old.
So you stayed in the service then?
I stayed in for for my basic training,
Uh-huh.
but they sent me to Fort Snelling, Minnesota for 90 days after they passed a 30-year-old law.
Yeah, okay.
What kind of training did they give you there at Camp Snelling?
Nothing, just walking, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Hiking. No training whatsoever.
So where'd you go from there?
From there, when I called Senator Mondale, that's when I got released, put in an ERC. And I got a job at the Waterville Arsenal. I knew a friend of mine, it was the boss of the guards.
Mm-hmm.
He says, they didn't want to give me the job. He says, why? He says, well, my grandmother was a cook for the Kaiser William. She had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. Well, he says they came from Germany. My mother was 6 years old when she came from Germany. So the guy, the big boss in the Arsenal, said, we can't hire him. Well, Ken Herring says, you are going to hire him. This man is an American citizen. He just served his time in the Army. So I got the job. But he says, we can't keep him anyway. He says, when they call him back, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says, how come they called you back? Well, I said, they bombed Pearl Harbor, and that's when I went back.
Okay, so the time you served was before the war started then?
Yes, before.
Okay. And then you were drafted?
They recalled me.
Oh, okay, you were recalled.
I was recalled. From Fort Snelling, Minnesota, I got released there. Why they kept me for 90 days was because they didn't have anybody who could do what I could do.
Mm-hmm. So you were recalled in 41 then?
I was in 41.
Okay, and where did you go from there?
Right, I went to Pine Camp, Camp Drum.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you do there?
I didn't do much of anything there. I had a company commander. He was a West Pointer from West Point, Captain Sidney V. Bingham. He said to me, he says, I got there. He says, now, first thing he says, do any of you fellows have a card, want to bring it on to the post at home? I told him, yes, I got one. So he says, I'll give you a pass. Go home and get your car and come back. So when I come back with the car and everything else, he says to me, Rogers, he says, were you ever in the 3rd Armory? I said, yes, I was. I was for 90 days out at Fort Snelling, Minnesota. So when he says, okay, what did you do? I said, nothing. I just was hitching and hiking, that's all. Well, he says, now look at it. He says, I got 14 second lieutenants coming now. He says, will you take them and teach them how to break down a gun, clean it, and teach them the manual arms? I said, sure, I can do that. Now he says, I got one thing I want you to do. I got a tank here that they can't find out what's wrong with it. So, and I got a 6x6 truck that belongs to our company, and he says they can't make that run right. So I says to him, I'll look at him and see. Well, the first thing I found out, I take a plug out on them, and they had the wrong plugs in it in the first place. So after that, I says, look at it. I said, oh, Lieutenant Rockefeller. I was looking for a paper now that I have. Lieutenant Rockefeller, Second Lieutenant Rockefeller. He was the manager of the whole line of tanks. So he come out and he's shooting his mouth off and everything else. And I says, listen, Lieutenant Rockefeller. I said, you know so much about fixing this. I said, what did you call me for? So he says, well, he said, turned his head and he looked at there's somebody walking down through the field, you know. So I says, all right. He says, I'll see you later. Yes, and I says, I'll be right here waiting for you. You don't have to tell me you'll be here. So I went back and I looked at the engine over on the tank, and I said, well, they got the wrong spark plugs and everything else. And the first thing I know, soldier, he said, some guy walking along says, soldier, how you make it out? Oh, I turned around, it was a colonel. So I saluted him and I said, good morning, Colonel. I said, have you got a few minutes? He says, I got all day, soldier. He says, what's your trouble? I said, I don't have no troubles. I said, I don't know what kind of mechanics you got here. So I told him, I said, just look at the spark plugs. The spark plugs were all burnt right down to the electrode, burnt right down into the electrode, you know. Mm-hmm. You couldn't set no gap on it because you had nothing in it, no kind of a gauge, only a spark plug gauge. That's mm-hmm. all you could get. You know, it has a little L on it. Mm-hmm. So he says, I don't know, he says. He looked at it and everything else. He says, now what else is wrong with it? Well, he says, everything is wrong with it. I said, it's not on time and everything else. So I have my own tools with me. That was in Camp Drum. After I got my car, I went home and got my car, and I had my timing light and a tachometer to set the speed on it. So in the meantime, I fixed it up and everything else, and he says, now look at it. He says, now, I says, who's your company commander? I said, Captain Sidney V. Bingham. So he says, now I told the tank commander, he says, go get Lieutenant Rockefeller. He says, I want him here, get him here immediately, if not sooner. Now, those are just the words he told me, the colonel. So he come back with him and he says, what's the trouble with this here? He says, no, you're trying to tell this man, he's a mechanic, but says 10 years old, he's a mechanic, and you're trying to tell him how to fix it. He said, what do you know about it? He says, nothing. So that's what business you got telling this man what to do? So he said to the tank commander, he said, go get Captain Bingham. So he got Captain Bingham and he says, now I want you just to listen to what this guy, Rockefeller, has to say. So he didn't say much of anything, and the colonel says, look, he says, you got no business to tell this man what to do or anything else. He's a mechanic. And I said, when you get a mechanic to do the job, let him do it. And don't come here and tell him what to do. So in the meantime, he says to The colonel says to Captain Bayham, he says, now look, he says, you don't only have a mechanic, he said, you have an educated, no, I don't know what to say now. He's not a fool, he says, or nothing. He says he's got an education. He says he don't need anybody to tell him what to do. So that was, then again he says, now, I'd like to have this man go through all these motors on these, the whole line of tanks. I think there was 20 or 40 of them. He says, Captain Bingham says, no, you can't do that. He says, that's battalion headquarters work. Well, he says, he put the hand up, he says, I'm battalion headquarters, he says, the colonel. He says, he says, if I can't get no stripes for him, he says, I'll either make him a first lieutenant or a captain. He says, so that was it. But he says, then the next day he was gone. Well, I did get the paper that he gave me, a slip that I had. I was going to show you that, but I haven't got it with me. I don't know where I put it.
Now, what kind of tanks were you working on?
The small ones. Now, I couldn't even tell you what the Sherman and the small ones.
Probably a Stewart tank.
The small ones. They could go 40, 50 miles an hour. The Shermans wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it must have been a Stewart.
They were hit and run. They only had a 37 millimeter gun on them, the small ones. So I got the job. So he said, now look at it. Captain Bingham says I got to have two papers, one for him and one for me. You know. So I did get the papers, but the colonel was gone the next day. I never got any stripes. I was nothing, just a buck private.
And then where did you go from there?
I went from there. I stayed right there, Camp Drum. Camp Drum. So that's what happened. I never went on maneuvers. Captain Bingham says, you're smart enough. He says, I don't want you to get hurt. You know what he told me? He says, now when you get through and we ever get to Normandy or any place else, he said, you're going right in the front lines. They're working on the tank. You keep the engines running, the motors running on the tanks. So that's where I ended up.
Now, when did you end up going overseas?
Huh?
When did you go overseas?
That I can't tell you. That was, Normandy, we left Normandy, let's see now, Chipping-Hang, England. We stayed, we went overseas. We had to wait till they made a headway for us so we could get into Normandy, get the tanks in. I think it was June when they hit it in June. I think it was around the 15th or 16th of July when we went in with the tanks. Then we never stopped. I was in every battle in Normandy, from the beginning till I got wounded on the German border.
Do you want to tell us about how you got wounded and where?
I was late getting in. I had to. We got into the German border. We chased the Germans out of the last town. So there was two tanks broke down out in the field. I had to go and fix them up, got them in and everything else, and brought them in. And the same Lieutenant Rockefeller, he says, "Man, he's trying to keep me in the village, you know." But I had the tank retriever and 6 men. I said, "We're not going to stay here." I says, "We just chased them out. They just chased them out of the town." I says, "Before morning," I says, "they're going to bombard the devil out of us, you know." So it was 1:15, 1:30, I think it was, in the morning. They started shelling us, and I got hit. 88 come down through the ceiling. I got a cut from here to my knee, top of my knee. That's what fixed me.
Were you a sergeant at that point?
Well, when I got on the boat, I was going across the channel. Captain McDonald came to me and he said, "Right," he says, "that's all I can get you, tech sergeant. That's all." Well, I should have told you before. Had a company commander. He was Captain McDonald was the motor pool. Captain Bryan was the captain of the company. So I had a fight with him now. I should tell you that. I should have told you this before. He gave me an order. I didn't get the order. Captain McDonald told me, now we've got to have some racks made for the back of the half tracks to put their duffel bags in. So Captain Bryan says to me, he says, take a 16-foot angle iron, 3/4 inch angle iron, cut that up in 4 pieces, and then he says you got to make 4 pieces for the top and 4 pieces for the bottom. Well, I says, Captain Bryan, I says, you got to cut these with a hacksaw. I says, Captain Bryan, I says, he says to me, he says the guy that's cutting the short ones can cut them twice as fast as the guy cutting the long ones. I says, Captain McDonald, or Captain Bryan, I said, what kind of a school did you go to? I said, man he makes 3 cuts and he's all done with the 4-footers. But he's got to make 8 cuts, 8 pieces he's got to cut. I said, they ain't got enough hacksaw blades in the whole county. Well, I says, what the hell kind of a school did you go to? I'm telling you just the exact words I told him. I said, what kind of a school did you go to? Wow, and he never spoke to me once after that. I said, I said, where did you buy your captain bars? I thought maybe he'd court-martial me, but I said, then again, I said, if you court-martial me, I says, I won't even need a lawyer. Anybody that had any common sense at all would know the guy cutting the long ones, hey, 3 cuts, he's all done. Made 4 pieces. But the guy cutting the top and the bottom, he's got to cut. I said, I won't do that. I said, I'll take a acetylene torch and I'll make them all in one piece. The top and the bottom. Just notch them out and bend them. And I said, no hacksaws at all.
Now you were injured earlier, weren't you, when you were trying to repair a tank?
Oh, yes, I was injured a couple times. The first job I had in Normandy, a half-track was stuck way down in a ravine. I had 6 men now and a tank retriever. You know what a tank retriever was, with an A-frame on it?
Yes.
So I'm up on the top. They had the tank was down in the ravine, so I'm up on the top putting a cable. They had the A-frame up. And they had a cable on that, hooked into the track to raise it and lower it. So I get up on it, putting the cable down through the pulley on the top, and the first thing you notice, they had to move the tank. Well, the guy on the outside, instead of taking the cable off of the A-frame, left the cable on the A-frame. They moved the tank, and you know where I ended up? On top of the tank with everything on top of me. Broke my collarbone, and they're still never fixed. And afterwards we got the tank up, the half-track out, and there was a tech sergeant. He was the mechanic, and they had all their tools in it they used it for a shop truck, the half-track. So he says to me, Sergeant, he says, will you do me a favor? I says, what is it? If I can, I'll do it. If I can help you, you know what I mean? They had a vise that he broke now, a vise that you could buy in a 5 and 10 cent store. Now, how much they paid for it, God only knows. So I says that he broke it. He says he had it. He used a hammer. I says, you can't use a hammer on one of them things. I said, it's only a little piece of cast iron. So I brazed it for him and everything else. Now I said, the best thing for you to do is get a pail of sand. After I get through brazing it and everything else, and put that right in the pail and throw this dry sand on it, the driest stuff you can get. Otherwise, he said, that thing will all fall apart because it was all red hot, when I brazed it. We didn't have no electric welders. I don't know why we never had electric welder on the truck, because they had small ones. I see them afterwards. A little gasoline engine run them, electric welders. I could have welded with the stainless steel. But then, he says to me, the tech sergeant, the master sergeant, he says of the half truck, he said, I'm going to put you in for a Silver Star. I says, who's your company, Commander? He says, Lieutenant Rockefeller. I said, just forget it. I says, I'll never get nothing from him. So, well, now I got to get back to him again. Now I had papers of that in the house. I don't know where I put them. I had an extract from Camp Drum. And the deal that I had with the colonel and everything else with the tank. Well, he says that about 3 days afterwards, I got a brochure, a citation from him, going to send me to Fort Riley, Kansas. Get on a plane, go to going to now. Oh God, where is it? Where the kangaroos are.
Australia.
Australia. He said, "You're going to Australia," he says. He didn't say to me that one of the sergeants I knew gave it to me this night. He says, "Here's this is Rogers. Here, we got something for you." He's a friend of mine. So he said, I looked at it. I said, so and the next morning I said to Captain Bam, I said, "What's this for?" He says, "What's what?" He says. He looked at it and he says, "Lieutenant Rockefeller's transferring me to Australia." Oh boy, he said, Captain Bam got it right away. He got a hold of the colonel. Now the colonel's name is and everything is on that extract that I have. I don't know where I put him. I thought I had him in that envelope. And I don't know where they are. I'll have to look. I thought I put them in that because I have a friend of mine now that was over in dialysis. And over there, I told one of the nurses, I said, "Will you give me a couple of copies of this?" And I know where I put them. I don't know.
Now, when you were out in the field, what kind of uniform did you wear? Did you wear overalls or?
No overalls. We had what the hell did they call them now?
Fatigues?
Fatigue clothes, all fatigue clothes, but they're coveralls. That's all we had was coveralls.
Did you ever carry weapons with you?
No.
Sidearms or anything?
We did, when we were drilling or something like that.
But I mean out in the field when you were...
I never went out in the field.
Well, when you were retrieving tanks and repairing tanks, I know you were behind the lines, but you never carried any kind of sidearms or weapons?
I had a Jeep that I picked up myself on the battlefield. So just laying there, so I said to the tank driver, I said, "Eddie Skukas." And he's the only man that knew where I was all the while. The other they weren't mechanics, you know what I mean? Hey, I don't like to say this about them, but they were just handymen, that's all. But as far as an engine goes, they didn't know nothing about it.
Now you had an encounter with Patton. You met Patton?
Yes, I did. I'm the only man that Patton ever put his arms around.
Tell us about that.
He said, well, there's the battle was raging to meet the devil, so there's 3 half-tracks blocking the road.
Now, whereabouts was this?
Huh?
Whereabouts?
Normandy. This is Normandy,
okay.
right in the front lines. I was in the front lines all the while.
Okay.
So Patton said, I got a call, it says there's 3 half-tracks, and you got to go and move them, get them out of the way. So on the meantime, I said, on the way up, I said, there was a Sherman tank stopped. And I said to the tank commander, I says, "I'll be right back." I says, "I got to go up here and move these half-tracks out of the way. General Patton has first choice, so I got to move them out of the way." I go up and I moved them out of the way, and
how did you move them?
I had to find out why they wouldn't start. So I took the top off the ignition. I looked, I said, no spark, no nothing. I said, well, something was wrong someplace. So I pulled the wires out on the coil, on the top of the distributor, and nothing, that was all right. So I pulled it out of the coil, they had a tape on it, so you couldn't get no electricity through it. So I took the tape off and I put back in the hole. I had spark already at the point, so I said, hey. So the 3 of them were the same way. So I moved them out of the road and everything else. And went back to I told the General Patton, I says, they're all moved, they're out of the way. He says, he's standing there up in the Jeep, and the battle was raging to beat the devil, you know what I mean? Hey, I don't know how anybody could live, after when them small tanks shooting. Oh. So he says, then I got to call it what we call the dog robber, and driving his Jeep. He says, General, he says, they're paging Rogers, Rogers, Rogers. He says, he looked at me, he says, are you Rogers? I said, yes, I am. I said, every tank commander would tell him, he says, that man, he says, needs a rest, and he's not getting paid for what he's doing. Oh, there's the exact words he said to me. He jumped out of the Jeep, and they put his arms around, took his gloves off, and dropped his binoculars. He says, Rogers, he says, I'm sorry, he says. I didn't know it was you. So that was the end of him. I never see him anymore.
What did you think of Patton?
This was what I see him. He was just a general, that's all to me. And I had to do my job, and he had to do his job.
Right.
But I know I was in every battle in Normandy, from the beginning to the end, till I got wounded.
Now you were wounded several times. Where else were you
Yes.
wounded?
When I got through with them half tracks, I went down and I found the loose wire on the Sherman tank, and I fixed that and everything else. And hey, the battle was still going on, so I got shrapnel in my foot yet. Went right through my shoe and everything else. That's where I got the first Purple Heart. The medic come along and he said, take your shoe off. I took my shoe off, and the shoe was full of blood. He said, hey, he said, you've been hit. I says, I know it. He wrapped it up and he says, the last Purple Heart I got, he says, here. And I got the box that it came in. I carried that all through in my musette bag. But those things, they think they happen, you know. Hey. And after I got wounded, this was 1:15 in the morning. And the last place we stayed in, and Lieutenant Rockefeller, he says, you got to stay here. I said, you don't have nothing to do with me whatsoever. You know, he was not my commander. My company commander told me, he says, when you get on that boat, he says, when you hit Normandy, he says, you're the boss. Don't take no orders from nobody. Which I didn't. So he tried to, but I had to take orders from him. I even had an MP that I met in the Pine Camp, Camp Drum. He come and he told Rockefeller, he says, you have nothing to do with this man. He has his own 6 men to take care of, and that's his business. He said, you better get him. I could swear like I swore at him, you know. I said, no business. So we're arguing there, and the first thing I know, here comes 15 tank commanders. All up, he said, and told Rockefeller, he says, if you don't get in that tank, we'll put you in that tank. Get out of here, and don't bother him. You don't have nothing to do with him. He saved our lives, you didn't. Those are the exact words that these commanders told Lieutenant Rockefeller. Nobody liked him. That is his own men, you know what I mean?
Let me ask you this, did Rockefeller survive the war?
I don't know. I don't know. After I got wounded, I don't know.
Did you spend any time in the hospital?
I did. I spent a lot of time in the hospital. I spent 5 days on a litter, laying at the airport. I was starting to smell already. I had all my old dirty clothes on. They never took nothing off of me. Before I was flown to England, to I think it was 150th or 160th General Hospital. They stole everything that I had in my musette bag.
Really?
Everything. Nothing left. I had 3 letters. One from the colonel that gave me permission to do all the engines on the tanks. I had 2 letters from my company commander so I could get back to the company. Everything was gone. I had 3 pair of gloves that they issued me, the officer's gloves, for the job I was doing. I don't know why. I was no privileged character, you know what I mean? But then cigarettes, oh my God. Nobody smoked cigarettes in my outfit. I had a bag and a half of cigarettes, cartons of cigarettes.
That must have been pretty unusual, because I thought most of the guys smoked back then, didn't
No, I had 6 men and nobody smoked. I didn't smoke myself.
they? Wow.
I never smoked.
So you were in a military hospital in England.
I was in a hospital in England for a long time. I was in a, they kept me for, they didn't know what the hell was wrong with me, what was making my legs swell up, you know?
Mhm.
And I was in the hospital, and one of the nurses came along. She says to me, she said, Mr. Rogers, she says, you know what's the matter with you? He says, you have hypertension. Well, I never had hypertension when I went into service,
Mhm.
you know? So I went down, after I got out, used to go to Waterville Arsenal. I had sinus trouble. I had an attack of it when I was in Camp Drum, when I was getting educated there.
Mhm.
So I went to my girlfriend that I met. She brought me over. Brought me to the hospital. I says at Pine Camp Drum, they put these two big sticks like that, you know, up in my nose with cotton on them. I told that to my doctors, and after I come out of service, he says, why, they done that 50, 60 years ago. You don't do that anymore. So he gave me penicillin. Powdered penicillin, and sniffed it up my nose, and it cleared me up in no time.
Now you ended up, I see in this article, you ended up in a hospital in Massachusetts after.
Yeah, that's
You're
where
in England.
That's where they let me go. I was in rehab for 1 year.
Mhm.
They still didn't know what was wrong with my leg, till my own doctors found out that I had 2 blood clots.
Oh.
Hey, I don't know, you can't see it from there. Right here, come from here, way up to here.
Mhm.
Dr. Mason took him out.
So you were discharged in May of 1945
Yeah,
from the
from
hospital,
the hospital.
and you returned home. You returned to Hoosick Falls then.
Yeah, I returned to Hoosick Falls, yeah.
Now you received a Bronze Star. Where did you receive that?
Well, that for going after 2 half-tracks. Me and the the retriever driver went in, took them away from the Germans.
Oh, the Germans were trying to get them.
Germans had 2 half-tracks, one at a time, at different times, you know.
Mhm.
2 young kids had them. I couldn't shoot them kids.
Oh, the
You know
Germans.
what I mean, 14, 15-year-old kids.
Were they in uniform?
I don't know whether they had uniforms
No,
or not.
I mean, were they
Well,
German soldiers?
they had the half-track, one of them, and then the next one the same way, you know.
Uh-huh.
They were kids. They had their turn their guns away when they see us coming and everything else. I couldn't kill them. Good God, you know. Hey, young kids, it wasn't their fault any more than mine or yours or anybody else, you know. So I said to the tank commander, I said, Eddie Skukas, he's the only man that knew where I was all the while. He had a phone, and I had the Jeep that I picked up had a phone and all kinds of guns and everything else in it. I don't know who left it. So I painted over the numbers on the bumper, and then nobody knew who it belonged to. Nobody was there. I picked it up on the field. I had a telephone in it and everything else. All kinds of guns and ammunition and hand grenades and everything else.
Now, following your discharge, where did you use the GI Bill at all?
The GI
Bill. Did you use the GI Bill at all?
Oh, no. Hey, with all them medals that I have, how much do you think they paid me? $334 a month.
Did you make use of the 5220 Club?
No. I never asked them for anything. The only thing I asked them for was more money, which I should have got. I should have had more stripes than I got.
Do you use the VA hospital at all?
I used to go to the Waterville Arsenal before the hospital was even built. That's where Dr. Kirk gave me the penicillin for my nose for sinus trouble. I went to Jerry Solomon. I had the book, I had the brochure and everything else. I had the box that it came in. Went to Jerry Solomon. He said that we can't do nothing about that. I got the letter someplace home. That Solomon to the government. He says, it's not on your record. So I said, a lot of things ain't on my record, you know. I said to Solomon, I said, here's the stuff right here that Dr. Kirk gave me from the Waterville Arsenal. That's before the hospital was built. So
Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
I belonged, yes, I belonged to the American Legion, and I belonged to the VFW in Saratoga, on Excelsior Avenue.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
How did it affect my life?
Yes. I mean, you went in at a very, you must have been a senior citizen at 30 years old in the
I
Army.
was 30 years old. Yeah, I was 32 when I was 32, over 30. I was 31, going on 32 when I left Fort Snelling. So,
How do you think did it have an effect on your life, and how?
it ruined my life.
In what way?
Hey, always. They never fixed the shoulder. After I well, I didn't tell you about this one here. One of our trucks got hit. Just pulled into this field, and I never see so many mushrooms in all my life. You know what? You ever pick mushrooms?
Mm-hmm.
Field mushrooms?
I've seen them. I don't
Great
pick
big
them.
things like that. Oh, no, look at that. Great big ones like that. And that field, I don't know, must have been 5 or 6 acres. You think it snowed with the mushrooms. So I picked up a couple, and I looked at them, turned one over and looked at them. I said, oh my God, I said, there isn't even a bug in them or nothing else, just as clean as could be. So I said to one of the fellas, I said, go and tell Cap McDonald, let's the cook come out and pick them again one day, pick them up. So in the meantime, they hit one of our trucks. That is, the cab was on fire, so me and the first sergeant run down. It was loaded with gasoline cans. We ran down, put the fire out, everything else, turned around, started back, and 88 dropped right down in front of me, on the side of me. He was walking on the right side of me, and I was on the left side, and the 88 went down in the mud. When that exploded, I flew away from him. He ran away and left me. So I laid there for over an hour and a half. Nobody came to look at me, or he ran away and left me, the first sergeant. So I laid there. Captain McDonald called the first sergeant in. He says, Sergeant, where's Rogers? Oh, he says, after he flew away from me, he's probably laying down there dead. I don't know. He says, he never came to look at me or anything else. He says, I didn't want to get hit. You know, how do you know where the next thing is going to fly? You know, it hit the ground, you know. When that 88 blew, it blew me sky high. I never got a scratch on the outside, but I spit blood for 5 weeks. Never see a doctor. And that's where I got one of them Purple Hearts for. I went to I went going up to DeAndrea's office when he used to be over there, where he was, you know. And I went to the recruiting station. I said, was talking to him, but I talked to one of the captains in there. He says, hey, he says, you know, you should have another Purple Heart for that. That's where the 4th one come in, for spitting blood for 5 weeks. No, not a scratch on the outside of me, but what it done on the inside of me, I don't know. But now I got to tell you this too. After the operation and everything else, some guy put me on a table, fluoroscoped me. He said to me, he says, were you ever blown up? I said, yes, I was. And I says, I spit blood for 5 weeks, and I never see a doctor. Well, he says, now I'm going to tell you something. He says, you know what's wrong with you? I said, I don't know. I said, I'm not a doctor or nothing else. He says, your heart is enlarged and tipped to one side, but I never see a doctor. Why did I spit blood for 5 weeks? I don't know.
Did you want to have him hold those medals?
Yes, I can hold them up.
What do you want to do with them?
We'll hold this up and have Wayne focus on it. So these are all your
They're all mine.
medals.
I never asked for one of them. I never stole any either.
Yeah, and you kept your dog tags.
I got with the same dog tags. I got 5 or 6 sets of them. They keep changing them.
Okay, let me focus in on everything here, so it might take a minute or so. Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Now, you know, the doctor that I go to in Clifton Park, when I first went there, Clifton Park, I had that with me. I had it out in the car, so I went out and got it, and he says, I don't know how many pictures he took of it. The doctor that I had to go to see at Clifton Park.
Could you hold this in front of you? Where and when was that taken?
That was taken in Los Angeles, California. We were in the Mojave Desert.
Well, you really haven't changed that much. I mean, you're a little grayer than you were back then. Okay, got it.
Okay, thank you.
There's a all them citations and everything in there now.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, where the heck is it here? You didn't see these. There's one I got now. That's the ambassador from France. He gave me a citation for chasing the Germans out of Normandy.
Okay, got it.
And there's a picture of Mitchell and all of them in there. I was the only guy that took so many pictures of because I had 4 Purple Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That fellow there on your right there where your thumb is, you know who he is?
No,
Huh?
no.
Dr. Wallingford's son. He was the boss of the Clifton Park.
Oh,
He's gone. I don't know where he's gone to now.
nice picture of you with your medals.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know they won't print nothing in the Saratoga paper about me either. Because somebody else wrote the story.
Oh,
And like I think, no, that whole
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for your interview.
that other big sheet there.